Hello, this is Neil Cole from Conversion Uplift. Today I'm going to show you how to set up server-side tracking with Stape.io. Now, server-side tracking has a number of benefits. Firstly, enhanced data security, because data is not presented in the browser that can potentially be leaked. Secondly, it has improved data accuracy because you reduce the ability of cookie blockers to block third-party cookies, because you can send data directly to a first-party cookie, as in to your own domain. And thirdly, probably the most important consideration is you can optimize page load speed, because you remove the load from the browser. Data is sent to the server in the cloud, not to the browser, and then you send the data onto your own domain. Stape.io also reduces the complexity of server-side tracking and makes it more affordable. As you can see from the pricing here, you can get, for 500,000 requests a month, you can get server-side tracking for as little as $20 a month, which for our website is plenty. So it's certainly worth considering, even for small websites. The first thing you need to do is create a Stape.io account, which is very straightforward. So we'll try and open this, and it opens up Stape. We would normally have to put in a few details, but because I've already got a Stape.io account, it's logging straight in. But once you've done this, you then need to create a container. Okay, so we'll just create a container here. Now we give the container a name, so we'll call it test conversion uplift, because we already have conversion uplift container. Now, next thing is the container configuration. Now, this comes from your GTM server container, so we'll go over to GTM. Now, here we're in our web container, so we need to create a new server container. So if we go to admin, and then we can click on the plus icon to create a new container here. We'll give it a name, so we'll call it the test container. And it's server side. Make sure it's clear which it is, and then you click server and you create. Now, the great thing about Stape is it makes it a lot easier to configure the server, because they provide the servers, so you don't need to go all through the process of setting up a Google Cloud server. So we click on manually provision trigger, and here is the container config, which is what we need to copy our container in Stape. So just copy that, close that a second, and then we'll go back to our Stape account, a new container. So here we're going to config, and then we need to choose the server location. Now, ideally this should be a location where most of your traffic is coming from, so ours is mainly UK and USA, so we'll go for EU or England, but you may want to create a container with a different location. You cannot change location though once it's been selected, so make sure you consult your client first before choosing the right location. Okay, and then you can create a container. Now, normally we would create one with a plan, in terms of a paid plan. This allows us to create our own subdomain to send data to our own domain, which is the main benefit of server-side tracking, so that you don't need to use third-party cookies. But in this instance, as an example, we'll just click on the free account. Okay, and then we'll proceed with continuing free plan. And you can also keep this click, which is upgrade container to the next tier automatically. That prevents data loss if your container does move up to above its threshold, so that you You don't need to manually upgrade, it will automatically upgrade. I'll click that for a minute because this is just a test. We'll continue the free plan. Great, so it's created our container. Now, with a paid plan, we would normally then create a new subdomain. So add a custom domain. We'd have to do that. We'd have to upgrade to a paid plan, but it gives the domain name here. So in the instance where you want to create your own subdomain, you would create it here, and it would be specified in here. Okay. If you do create your own custom domain, so a subdomain of your website, such as we use data.conversion.co.uk, Stape will specify the DNS records that you need to point the subdomain to. So that's something that you'll need to change either yourself in the admin area, for instance, in WordPress, or you need to ask your client to do that for you, to go into the DNS records. If you have a WordPress website, then you can use the Stape.io plugin, which actually simplifies it again for you. Now we'll copy the domain name because we'll need this later, so we'll just sort of hover over it, click copy, and now we'll go to the server container to configure that. First thing we need to do here is go to the variables, so we need to enable some of the inbuilt variables. So we need to configure, and we need the client name, which is going to be GA4, and also the event name, which is already configured. You could also enable some of the others, but we'll just leave that for the moment. We'll now create our tag in our server container, so we'll go to tags, and we'll create a new one. Now I like to use folders, so I'll create a new folder for GA4. And this is going to send all events from our web container to the server. So I'll put GA4, and it's all events. I click on tag configuration, and we select analytics, and it's going to be GA4. Okay, there. Then we need to put the measurement ID from our property. Now normally we'd recommend when you're migrating to server side that you create a test property first, so you can actually run testing using your test property, so you don't put data into your existing web property. So we're going to use a test property, which is for our staging site. So we'll just get the measurement ID, copy that, go back to server container. Now you can just paste it in here, but we prefer to set up a variable, which it means that you can scale up easily. So we'll create a new variable, so we'll call this the GA4, and put the measurement ID in there. Then we create a constant variable. This just makes it easier to add the measurement ID to other tags, other events in the server container, so you can scale up. It also allows you to more easily send it data to different properties. You've got different variables for different tests and production properties, for instance. Okay, so that's done there. We then need to create a trigger, and here we want to create a new one. We want to send all events, not just pages, to the property. So it's GA4 events. So use the J4 folder, and you want to choose a custom tag trigger bar, and it's some events. And this is why we needed to specify or enable the client name earlier. We just got client name and event name at home. So we want to equal the client name, and it needs to be GA4. I've saved that, so we've created the tag and the trigger, and we can now save that. We now need to go back to the web container. First of all, we'll go back to Stape and copy our domain name. Okay, so in this case, it's a Stape one, but we normally say we would have created our own subdomain. So I've just copied that. Yeah, worked. Okay, so we need to go to our web container now. This is our template, but we're actually going to use our conversion uplift container, so I'll just go to that and just stop this a minute. So I've brought us back to the conversion uplift container. So we need to go to the Google tag. So you just type in Google tag into the search to Google tag. So if you don't already have a configuration settings variable set up, then you can just add a parameter to your Google tag, which should be server container URL. It comes up automatically, and then you need to paste in the new URL in here. So it's gone in there, or you can create a variable again, which is what we tend to prefer to do, is create a new constant variable. We'll leave it at that for the moment. If you use configuration settings variable, then you could add your server container URL into here, okay, which is what we normally do. But in this instance, I'll just leave it as that. Okay. The other thing you do so for make sure all events also send data to the new server container. You need to go to the shared event settings variable, which if you created one. So again, we would add our server URL in here. So we'll just add a parameter, and so it's done correctly. Server container URL, and then we just paste in URL, and we'll save that, and that will automatically, because it's been added to every event in our container, will automatically send the data to the server side container. So we'll save that. Okay, the next thing we need to do is go back to the server container and specify the URL for the server side. So we need to go to admin, and go to container settings and add the URL here. Okay, we'll just paste that in. It's a Stape one in this instance, and we save that. Go back to our workspace. Okay. Right, the final thing we need to do now is to test that the setup is working. So we'll go back to our client container, web container as we call it, and we'll do preview. I'll just let this load, and then we'll just go back to connect. That's fine. We'll load up our website. and I'll actually go back to Tag Assistant and click Continue. That's loading fine. Now we need to go to the server container and preview this. And then we need to go back to our website. It's already shown data here actually, that page view. So sometimes it doesn't load immediately, so sometimes you need just to refresh the web page. So just refresh. Let's have a quick look. First of all, let's inspect. So right click, inspect. But this is another way of checking that it's actually working. Is go to network and put in collect v equals 2. That's all the GA4 events. And just refresh. Let's get an event to come up. So here we've got an event here. It's probably a page view. And we'll look at the header. Now here, normally it would show Google as the domain that the data is being sent to, but in this instance, as you can see, is our new Stape.io domain that the data is being sent to. So that is correct. That's the easiest way of checking whether our website is server-side or not, is if it's a subdomain or a domain that for the client, or a domain for such as Stape, then that is going to be server-side. If it's Google, then it's not server-side, it's client-side. So if we go back to the Tag Assistant for the server side, you can see all the page views coming through, performance time. It's got all the events coming through to the server, so it's definitely working, so that's great. So it doesn't take long to set up with Stape. Stape is really ideal for small to medium companies that don't want the hassle of having to go through the Google server, and it's very cost effective. So I hope you found that useful, and I'd certainly recommend that you move to server-side tracking, because it does resolve a number of issues with site performance and data security and cookie blockers. Thank you again.